She was 4 months postpartum, did everything alone, and he called her the problem. She is 4 months postpartum, running circles around the house, managing a toddler, feeding a newborn, and packing an entire diaper bag from scratch. And her husband is just standing there. On the phone. Chatting away like they have all the time in the world. And somehow, by the end of all of this, she is the one being called an asshole. Let that sink in for a second before we go any further. So here is the full picture. This woman, who is still in the thick of the 4th trimester, her body still recovering, her hormones still all over the place, her sleep schedule completely destroyed, wakes up and decides to take her family on a walk to the local playground. A simple, wholesome family outing. She and her husband have a plan. They want to time the walk with the baby's nap time so the newborn will fall asleep in the bassinet stroller on the way. It is a good plan. It is the kind of plan that feels like a small victory when you are in the fog of new parenthood, the kind where you think, okay, if we can just get the timing right, maybe everyone wins today. It requires a little coordination. It requires everyone to be moving in the same direction at roughly the same time. That is not a lot to ask. And our narrator here, this exhausted mother, she does her part and then some. While her husband fills a water bottle and grabs some snacks, she is nursing a 4-month-old baby, changing that same baby, changing the toddler, getting the toddler into new clothes, assembling the entire diaper bag with all the essentials, and on top of all of that, she is trying to get herself together too. We are talking changing her own clothes and managing what she describes as minimal hygiene, which honestly reads as code for just trying to feel like a human being for 5 minutes. Just wanting to look in the mirror and recognize yourself. Just wanting 30 seconds that are not dedicated to another person's immediate physical need. All of this is happening simultaneously, in the particular kind of beautiful chaos that is a home with a toddler and a newborn, where every completed task seems to spawn 2 more. And the whole time she is doing all of this, she is also chasing a 2.5-year-old away from the bassinet stand because that toddler has decided today is the day to investigate whether the baby can be tipped over. She is nursing and redirecting and packing and dressing and mentally tracking 5 things at once, the way mothers of young children do so constantly and so automatically that they sometimes forget it even counts as labor. Meanwhile, what is Dad doing? He is on the phone with his father. Now, to be fair, that is not automatically a crime. People take phone calls. Life happens. The issue is not that the call started. The issue is what happened next. Because here is where the timeline becomes really important. The baby's naptime window is closing. Every parent of a newborn knows that the naptime window is sacred. You do not mess with the naptime window. If you miss it, you are dealing with an overtired baby who will not sleep, which means nobody sleeps, which means the rest of the day becomes a survival exercise in managing exhaustion on top of exhaustion. So the clock is ticking. You can almost feel it in the story, that particular low-grade panic of watching the window narrow while you are still not out the door. And 10 to 15 minutes past the naptime target, this man is still on the phone. Not wrapping up. Not holding up one finger to say give me 30 seconds. Not making any kind of gesture that acknowledges the reality unfolding around him. Just having a completely relaxed, casual conversation while his wife is sprinting around the house managing 2 children and the logistics of a family outing entirely by herself. He is standing in that house the way you stand in an airport when your flight is not for 3 hours. Unbothered. Unhurried. Completely untethered from the urgency that his partner is swimming in. She tries to be gentle about it. She makes eye contact. She softly asks if he is ready to go. She is not yelling. She is not being dramatic. She is giving him the most polite, respectful off-ramp imaginable. Think about what it takes to be that measured in that moment. She has been doing the work of 2 people. She is running on broken sleep. Her body is still healing in ways that most people never have to think about. She is watching the naptime window close in real time. And still she comes to him quietly, calmly, and asks the most reasonable question in the world. Are you ready? And what does he do? He nods vaguely, turns away from her, and keeps on talking. He just dismisses her entirely. Not unkindly, maybe. Maybe without even realizing he did it. But he turned his body away from her and continued his conversation, and in that single motion he communicated something very clear. That whoever was on the other end of that phone was more deserving of his attention than she was. In that moment, she is not his partner in this family operation. She is background noise. So she keeps doing everything herself. Because what else is she going to do? She is not going to stand there and wait for him to notice that the situation requires his attention. She is a mother in motion and she keeps moving. And eventually he does get off the phone. But here is where the story takes a sharp left turn. Because instead of looking around at the controlled chaos his wife just navigated solo and feeling even a little bit of gratitude or awareness, he comes out of that phone call annoyed. At her. He is upset that she interrupted his conversation. He looks at the situation and his read of the room is that everyone is ready except her, and that she cannot handle 2 kids without freaking out. I am going to need a moment here. He packed the snacks. She did everything else. He filled the water bottle. She dressed both children, fed the baby, assembled the diaper bag, got herself dressed, and managed a toddler near a hazard the entire time. And his conclusion is that she is the one who cannot handle things. That is not a misread of the situation. That is a complete rewrite of reality. That is looking at the scoreboard and announcing the other team lost. And it only gets worse from there. Because now they are arguing. Both tones are rising, which is completely understandable because she has just been dismissed, gaslit, and blamed all within the span of a single morning. The toddler is crying. The baby, bless that child, is somehow just peacefully chilling in the bassinet, apparently unbothered by the entire implosion happening around her. But the toddler is absorbing all of this. That 2.5-year-old is standing in the middle of a room that has shifted in temperature and tone, looking between 2 parents with wide, uncertain eyes, his little nervous system registering every raised voice and sharp word even if his brain cannot yet make sense of them. And in the middle of this argument, in front of their 2.5-year-old child, this man calls his wife an asshole. Not once. Twice. Clearly audible to their son. That is not a slip. That is a choice. Because here is the thing about saying something like that in front of your child. You cannot walk that back with a look or a gesture. The toddler heard it. The toddler is going to absorb the emotional temperature of that moment whether he understands the word or not. Children that age are extraordinarily sensitive to conflict. They do not need to understand vocabulary to understand that one parent just said something cutting and cruel to the other. That lands. That stays. And the fact that this man said it twice tells you it was not an accident. He meant for it to hit. What makes this situation particularly suffocating for this woman is the aftermath. Because after all of that, after the argument, after the name-calling, after the walk presumably happened or did not happen, the rest of the day is described as tense. And he sees nothing wrong with any of it. Not the phone call. Not the dismissal. Not the blame. Not the name-calling. Nothing. He has apparently conducted an internal review of his own behavior and issued himself a full exoneration. No apology. No moment of sitting beside her and saying I think I handled that badly. Just silence and the particular cold distance of a person who has decided the matter is closed because they have decided they are not at fault. And that silence, that absence of accountability, might actually be the most damaging part of all of this. Because she is sitting there genuinely questioning her own perception. She writes that she is trying to see it from both sides. She is 4 months postpartum, she is exhausted, she is running on empty, and instead of being supported by her partner she is being made to feel like she is the unstable one, the incapable one, the asshole. She even says she does not know anymore if she is right. That is not confusion. That is what happens when someone consistently reframes reality around you until your own instincts stop feeling trustworthy. That is what it looks like when a person has been told so many times that their experience is wrong that they begin to genuinely wonder if it is. She used a very specific word. Gaslighting. And I want to take that seriously for a second because it is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but in this case it fits precisely. Gaslighting is not just lying. It is making someone doubt their own experience. It is taking an event they lived through and telling them they experienced it wrong. She was there. She did the work. She saw what happened. And he looked her in the eye and told her the problem was her. That is not a communication issue. That is a pattern. The postpartum period is already one of the most physically and emotionally vulnerable times in a person's life. Your body is healing from something enormous. Your identity is shifting in ways that nobody fully prepares you for. Your sleep is in ruins. The simplest tasks can feel monumental. Your emotions are close to the surface because your hormones are recalibrating and your nervous system is perpetually on high alert from months of tending to a being who cannot yet communicate anything except need. And in the middle of all of that, you need your partner to show up. Not perfectly. Not heroically. Just present. Just aware. Just willing to say, hey, I see you doing a lot right now, let me step in. That is all she was asking for. Eye contact. A pause in a phone call. Basic participation in the shared project of keeping their family moving. And he could not give her even that. Now let us be honest about what a verdict here actually requires. Because some people reading this might say, well, communication could have been better on both sides, and sure, in a vacuum, maybe. But we are not in a vacuum. We are in a house with a 4-month-old baby and a toddler, with a woman who just did the work of 2 parents while one of those parents stood there on a casual call, and then had the audacity to turn around and call her the problem. That is not a both sides situation. That is one person dropping the ball and then throwing it at the other person's head. She is absolutely not the asshole here. Not even close. She asked politely for her husband to wrap up a call so they could execute a plan they both agreed to. She was doing the lion's share of the preparation work. She was managing an active safety situation with the toddler. She was watching the nap time window close in real time. Her frustration was not only justified, it was proportionate. The fact that she even framed her request as softly as she did under those circumstances is honestly remarkable. He, on the other hand, has some serious reflecting to do. And not just about that morning. Because the way he reacted after the fact, the defensiveness, the blame shifting, the name calling, the silent treatment, none of that is the behavior of someone who made a mistake and feels bad about it. That is the behavior of someone who genuinely believes he did nothing wrong. And that is the part that should worry her the most. Because a person who cannot see what they did wrong cannot fix it. And a person who cannot fix it will keep doing it. She deserves a partner who shows up. Who sees the weight she is carrying. Who does not stand on the sidelines and then blame her for being tired. Full stop. Are church mission trips just resume candy and vacation with a Bible? This got controversial fast. You open your social media on a sunny July morning and your feed is flooded. Photo after photo of smiling teenagers in matching t-shirts, holding up half-built walls in some country far from home, captioning it with something about being called to serve. And you sit there, coffee in hand, feeling something between skepticism and outright irritation. But you are not sure if you are allowed to say it out loud. She said it out loud. So here is the position our narrator is taking, plainly and directly. Short-term summer mission trips, the kind that last a few weeks over summer break, are primarily about the people going on them, not the people they claim to serve. The teenagers and college students get a transformative life experience, a spiritual highlight reel, and something genuinely impressive to put on a college application or a resume. The church gets compelling photography and a fundraising narrative. And the actual communities being visited? They get a rotating crew of unskilled volunteers who do not speak the language, cannot sustain any project past the summer, and in some documented cases leave behind structures that are genuinely unusable or worse, painted with materials containing lead. That last part is not hyperbole. There is a real and well-documented body of criticism around short-term mission trips that aligns almost exactly with what this woman is saying. Development economists and aid workers have been raising these concerns for years. The term voluntourism exists precisely because researchers and practitioners started noticing that a lot of well-intentioned short-term volunteer programs were doing measurable harm to the communities they were designed to help. Unskilled labor displaces local workers who actually need those wages and that income to support their families. Money spent flying volunteers overseas, covering flights and accommodation and group t-shirts and matching luggage tags, could fund a local organization for months, sometimes for an entire year. And the psychological impact on communities of being repeatedly visited by outsiders who photograph their poverty, smile for the camera, and then vanish back to their comfortable lives has been studied and found to be genuinely damaging to community dignity and long-term self-sufficiency. So the frustration she is expressing is not new. It is not fringe. It is actually the mainstream position of a lot of people who work in international development. The difference is that most of those people express it in academic journals and policy papers, and she is expressing it on a Reddit post after watching people she knows flood social media with their matching t-shirt photos. The critique did not start with her. She just happened to be the one sitting at her kitchen table on a July morning with enough accumulated frustration to finally type it out. Now the personal layer here adds some texture to it. Her boyfriend has a long history with church camps, so this is not an abstract political opinion for her. This is not something she read in a development economics paper and decided to adopt as a talking point. This is something she is watching play out in real time among real people in her social circle, people she has sat across from at dinner, people whose names she knows, people whose lives she is actually familiar with. And when she watches those people post about being called to serve, her reaction is an eye roll. Not a prayer. Not a warm and supportive comment with a little heart emoji. An eye roll. And honestly? That is the reaction of someone who has been watching this cycle repeat for long enough that the performance of it has started to feel hollow. She is not cold. She is tired. Here is what I think she is really getting at, even if the post does not spell it out in these exact terms. There is a difference between genuine service and the aesthetics of service. Genuine service is unglamorous. It is long. It is done without an audience watching and without anyone pulling out a phone to document the moment. It often does not result in a great photo because the most meaningful work, the work that actually changes something for the people receiving it, tends to happen slowly and quietly over time. The kind of service that results in a perfectly framed image of a smiling teenager holding a baby in a foreign country, posted with a scripture verse caption and a location tag, that is a different animal entirely. That is service as content. Service as identity performance. And when the primary beneficiary of the service is the person performing it, and the primary output is a social media post that earns likes and comments and affirming words from people back home, the question of who is actually being helped becomes very legitimate and very uncomfortable. She draws a sharp line herself. She says the only mission trips she considers genuine are the ones lasting 2 to 3 years. That is a real commitment. That is arriving somewhere unfamiliar and choosing to stay long enough that it stops being unfamiliar. That is learning the language not from a phrase book but from necessity, from daily life, from relationships built over months. That is integrating into the community in a way that a 2-week visit simply cannot replicate, no matter how sincere the intentions behind it. That is building trust over time, doing work that can actually be sustained because you are there long enough to sustain it and care enough to see it through. That is not a summer vacation with a charitable theme. That is a vocation. And the difference between those two things is not a matter of degree. It is a difference in kind. Now is she being a little absolute about it? Maybe. Not every short-term trip is a disaster. Some organizations do genuinely useful work even in compressed timeframes, coming in with specific technical skills that local communities actually requested and actually need. Some volunteers come back changed in ways that lead to lifelong commitments to the cause, donating money for decades, changing careers, returning again and again in more meaningful capacities. And some of those teenagers posting the photos will go on to dedicate their careers to international development because a 2-week trip lit a spark in them that nothing else could have. That is real and worth acknowledging, because dismissing it entirely would be its own kind of unfairness. But acknowledging that does not mean the broader criticism is wrong. And I think that is where the verdict lands here. She is not an asshole for thinking this. She is engaging with a legitimate critique that has real intellectual and ethical weight behind it. The short-term mission trip industrial complex, and yes, that phrase exists, has been criticized by theologians, development experts, and former participants alike. Questioning it is not anti-religious. It is not mean. It is not the reaction of someone who wants to tear down other people's faith or diminish the sincerity of their intentions. It is actually one of the more honest conversations that faith communities could be having with themselves, if they were willing to sit with the discomfort of it. The discomfort her opinion creates comes from the fact that she is not just critiquing a system. She is indirectly questioning the motives of people she knows personally, people who believe sincerely that they are doing something good, people who raised money and packed bags and got on planes with genuine love in their hearts. And that is harder. It is easier to criticize a policy than to look at your friend's vacation photos and think this is more about you than it is about them. That thought feels unkind. It feels uncharitable. It bumps up against everything we are taught about assuming the best in people. But easier does not mean wrong. And kind does not always mean silent. The verdict here is simple. Noticing that a system disproportionately benefits the participants over the people it claims to serve is not cynical. It is clear-eyed. The real question is not whether she is an asshole for thinking it. The real question is whether the people going on these trips are asking themselves the same question. And based on the posts she is seeing, the answer seems to be no. Which is exactly why someone needed to say it. Drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder today, and if this kind of content is for you, a like and a subscribe would mean a lot.